Hello and welcome to this presentation which is entitled Welcome to Market Research. It's easier than you think to ask your customers what they want. A brief introduction to myself. I'm Geraldine Chettin, Marketing Manager at Hickson's Business Advisors. Prior to working at Hickson's, I've worked for 25 years in the marketing industry in both the charity sector and the commercial environment. So I hope today I can bring my breadth of experience and knowledge about market research to help you. So what we'll be covering today is what is market research, what types of market research are there, what suits my needs, how to go about getting market research done, how to analyse it and use it effectively, and lastly some potential pitfalls and some hopefully handy tips, and then over to you to use what you've learned. So first of all, what is market research? A straw poll raised these sort of comments. It's an unnecessary expense, something that only big organisations can do with big budgets. It's not for me, I don't have the time. Or it's just too complicated and I know what my customers think. Or alternatively, you might think of it as someone with a clipboard in the high street who comes up to ask you questions about your favourite flavour of yoghurt, etc. Or perhaps it's those complicated acronyms that are quoted by newsreaders and Jeremy Paxman when they're interviewing a politician, Ipsos Mori, etc., etc. Yes, there is market research, but what I hope you will see today is that it doesn't have to be complicated. So the textbook definition of market research that I found to be the most accurate is asking people for their opinions in a structured way so that you can produce hard facts and statistics to guide you. I like this definition because it used the word guide, which I think is very important. We'll come back to that later. Strictly speaking, there are two types of research. Quantitative research uses numerical analysis to measure results of research, whereas qualitative research looks at attitudes and perceptions. These are sometimes known as qual and quant for short. Here are a couple of examples to help distinguish between the two. Firstly, quantitative. A question phrased in a quantitative way would read, please rate the service you've received from Widget Brothers on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being poor and 10 being excellent. So typically it gives a rating scale, numerically based, and the participant has to tick a box that reflects their view on the question. Whereas qualitative would say something like, please tell us briefly what you found particularly helpful or unhelpful about the service you received from Widget Brothers today. You can see the question is structured in quite a different way. It is opinion based and therefore asks the participant to express opinions back in words. This type of response will take longer. A different way of looking at this is what's called open and closed questions. Closed questions will obtain a set measurable answer, i.e. a question would be phrased such as, do you agree with the following statement? The person can only really answer yes or no. An open question is opinion based, so it would be phrased more like, what do you think about so and so, and the person then expresses an opinion back. So it's very important before you start any research project to think about a few key things. Think about what you really want to know and from whom. Please use research as part of your business and marketing strategy. For example, for product development, for customer insights, or for pricing. Or perhaps there's a challenge or problem you want research to help answer. And most importantly, set a clear objective for the research and stick to it. It is very easy to broaden out research to include lots of different subject areas, but this can become confusing both for the person analysing it and for the participant. Why do research? It will help inform your business and marketing strategy, and it must always be part of that. Think about the things it could tell you. What do my customers really think about my business? Who else could I be targeting? How do I rate in comparison to the competition? Could I expand my business into another area or product, for example? A technique that will help you focus on what objective you want from your research is called the golden question. It's a simple way to help you focus on what you really want from market research and to think about the golden question. If you could only ask one question, what would it be? The cartoon here shows an example in a rather amusing way of a character saying, "We could do a survey with only one question. Do you love us?" Perhaps you think this technique is not used in real life. I found this article recently in a national paper which showed that it is. NHS hospitals have been asked to participate in a research survey with their patients that asks them only two key questions. Were they treated with dignity, and would they want a friend or relative to be treated there? Similarly, NHS staff in hospitals are going to be asked the same question. Would they want a friend or relative to be treated there? A good example of two golden questions for the patients and just one for the staff, but it will tell the NHS an awful lot about the perceptions of that hospital. So thinking about what suits your needs, start with your objective and ask, what do I want to ask? What do I want to ask? Who do I want to ask? What do I want to ask them? And what is the best way to ask them? Deciding who to ask sounds easy, but there are some clearly defined audiences and they must be treated separately. It may be your existing customers, the ones that you have an existing business relationship with. It may be your lapsed customers, those with whom you did business a while ago but they've not come back to you. Or it may be your potential customers, the ones you want to reach that are like your existing ones but you're not reaching them yet. It's also very important to think about reaching the right number of people to make a relevant sample. Sample sizes are very important in research. It must be remembered that not everybody that is asked to participate in research will. A typical figure would be something like asking 100 people, but on average only 10 to 20% of those would actually participate. So do make sure that your sample number is large to start with to give you an accurate response. What's the best way to ask them? Once you've decided who you want to ask and what you want to ask, you need to decide the best way of reaching them. Consider practical options. Here are a few to think about. Face to face, while you meet with your existing customers. It is a route to ask questions, and it's easy and potentially very cheap. But you may not get entirely honest answers, as people are reluctant sometimes to give a negative response when they're face to face with the recipient. You could do research via an existing customer newsletter. If you send out a newsletter on a quarterly or annual basis, it's an ideal opportunity to ask some questions about your service, for example. If you use this route, make sure that you have a clear response route for the participant, for example a free post address, or enclose a reply paid envelope, or a telephone number or an email to respond. Do make it easy and clear that how they must respond to the research. Or you could use piggybacking. That's enclosing a questionnaire in an existing piece of material, for example a client letter or an invoice. This is relatively cheap because you're saving the postage of distributing it, and sometimes a natural route. For example, I recently received a questionnaire in an invoice from a solicitor and therefore was able to send it back when I made my payment. You can also send them out solus, that means standalone on its own. Obviously the post cost will be greater, or you could email it separately. You can use the phone for questionnaires, but be aware that telephone research is a specialist area, and I would strongly recommend seeking professional advice if you plan to do this, because telephone interviewing is a professional skill and it's also quite fraught with regulations, for example the telephone preference service, which you need to be aware of and include in any selections of names that you make to ensure that they have been screened. Another route is what's called a focus group, where a group of people are brought together for a facilitated discussion to find out more about the topic about research. This route can be very effective, particularly if you're using visual material such as a new advertising campaign, a brand design, a television advertisement, etc. Something that can be shown and discussed. But again, it's very important that a focus group is facilitated by a professional to get the most out of it. So thinking about your audiences, if you're thinking of researching past customers to find out more about why they didn't come back to you, I would recommend that email or mail are the best options. Let's be honest, you're not going to be front of mind for these people. They may well have moved to another supplier for your particular service or product, and therefore a telephone call out the blue may not necessarily be the best route. You would probably want to ask them why they didn't come back to you and what would make them return. Would it be lower prices or better service levels perhaps? Open questions are more suitable for these kind of areas because they enable the respondent to express opinions. If you're considering researching potential customers, this is probably the hardest audience to do because they don't know you. How can you target them? How can you get a representative sample? Do watch out for data protection regulations and telephone preference service, for example, and seek professional help from a market research expert if you can. They will help you profile the right type of people to ask to get the answers that you want. Online research providers are also available that can help you target questionnaires relatively simply and cheaply to audiences that they can access. Often this research is done anonymously to get an unbiased view. So to sum up so far, keep it simple. Research doesn't have to be overcomplicated. Often less is more. You can gather useful research data simply. Make the inclusion of questions standard and part of your service. So, for example, include tell us how we've done on regular communications. Always remember to log and act on the feedback that you get and track your results over time to help see improvements. There's really no point investing time and money in research if you aren't going to use it. Make analysis of the responses to your research a regular activity and build acting upon it into your business planning and strategy to get the best value from it. Make it somebody's responsibility to track and analyse the research. And finally, I'd like to share with you a few pitfalls and a few handy tips that I've come across in my years of working with research. It's important always to view research results with a healthy dose of common sense. This sounds straightforward, but often it's very easy to get dragged into what statistics are telling you without thinking about the common sense aspects of that. I have a good example. I worked on a product launch a while back for a new membership grade, and we did research to find out what people would be prepared to pay. One of the questions was, would you be prepared to subscribe at an annual cost of £40? And we got quite a negative response back from the research. They weren't keen to do that. But with a common sense view, we took a step back and said, perhaps we're just not asking in the right way. So we went back and did further research, asking, would you be prepared to pay £3.50 a month, the cost of a few drinks across the bar? And we got a very positive response as a result. Yes, they would be prepared to pay that. Those quick-witted amongst you will realise that 12 times £3.50 is actually more than £40 a year. So it's absolutely down to how you phrase the question in the first place. If you're using number scales for people to rate you, use an even number of options. If you use an odd number of options, people will go for the middle one. So for example, if you give them an option to rate between 1 and 5 your service, the majority will probably go for 3. But all that's telling you is your average. If you give them a scale of a rating between 1 and 6, they will at least have to err on the side of slightly positive or slightly negative. So that is telling you something more. Using incentives will increase response to research. A lot of people do this. So by offering a free gift for participating in the research, for example, or a prize draw. But be aware that results to the research will be less accurate as a result. There are many people who will simply participate in research to get the free gift or enter the draw, but their opinions may not necessarily be accurate ones. There are analysis tools to help you eliminate the margin of error for the people who do participate in this way. If you do plan to use incentives, I would recommend researching them. Use a closing date or a please reply by date to encourage response. It's a simple technique and it doesn't have to be attached to anything specific apart from your convenience, but it will encourage people to respond. If you don't put anything like that, they're more likely to just file it away or not complete it. And lastly, try mystery shopping your company or organisation by phone. This is a simple technique that enables a member of staff to phone in anonymously, ideally using a non-recognisable voice, to find out what customer care service you offer. So pretending to be a customer or potential customer, phoning into the front line with the sort of questions that they would ask and seeing how your call is handled. It will give you a very good flavour of how a customer perceives your business and will flag up areas for improvement. If you do this, it's important to share back your findings with the staff involved and work on addressing any discrepancies that it flags up, for example, being held on the line, or passed around several members of staff before you get an answer. It will really help you focus on improving your service levels. Thank you for listening. I hope you found the presentation useful. If you would like to find out more about any of the points I've covered today, do contact me at geraldine@hicksons.co.uk or call 01202 520010 and I would be happy to help. Thank you.